Today I will be reading Exodus 20:16 and John 8:32. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free.
One Sunday, a minister said to his congregation, "Next week I plan to preach about the sin of lying." And in preparation for that message, I'm asking all of you to read Mark chapter 17. And the following Sunday, he stood up to preach and asked, "How many of you took the time to read Mark 17? And nearly every hand went up. And the minister smiled and said, "Well, that's very good. But Mark only has 16 chapters. I will now proceed with my message on the sin of lying." We've been looking at the Ten Commandments, and we're up to number 9 today. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. Now, specifically, this is a warning against perjury. In legal proceedings, it was absolutely prohibited to tell a lie. And even in our culture, it is a crime to lie under oath. You can go to jail for that. Just like you can go to jail if you get caught stealing, like we talked about last week. But as we said with that commandment from last week about stealing, there is a general principle taught in Scripture that has to do with a lot more than just the legal aspect of a crime. There are lots of ways to steal, like we talked about last week, besides breaking into somebody's house and taking their stuff. In the same way, there are lots of ways to bear false testimony besides just lying under oath in a court of law. As we have looked at the Ten Commandments, we have studied them in view of a big myth that the world tries to get us to believe, to buy into. Usually this myth is dressed up as something that's good and wonderful, but we have found in each case that just the opposite is actually true, that buying into the world's myths leads to the exact opposite of good and wonderful, leads to misery and heartache and despair and loneliness in life. And the same is true with this commandment. The world tells us lying is not only okay, but it's even necessary to lie just to get through life. Now, most people must lie just going about in the course of everyday life, making their living, keeping peace with their people that live in their home, or getting along with their neighbors or their family or their co-workers. The message the world sends is that doing all the things that we have to do in life necessitates the telling of small and supposedly inconsequential lies, which we've come to call little white lies. Well, people who say that lying is okay are lying. If you follow politics, which is hard not to do these days, you've probably noticed in the last several years, lying has been kind of reclassified. It's no longer even considered all that distasteful or wrong or unacceptable. Now it's an art form. Not too many years ago, there was a show called Spin City, which was based on this concept. If politicians and their staff can successfully spin their version of the truth to either soothe their constituents or to deceive them, well, then they're considered to be exceptionally good politicians, leaders worth looking up to. I'm sure this has existed in all generations, but it's almost like it's celebrated today, the ability to spin the truth. Someone told me the joke the other day about a politician who noticed a group of boys standing around a small stray dog. And being the politician, he went up to the boys and said, "Well, what are you doing, boys?" "Telling lies," one of them replied. "The one who tells the biggest lie gets to keep this stray dog." And so the politician acted shocked, and he said to the boys, "Oh, when I was your age, I would never even dream of telling a lie." And the boys looked at each other guiltily and suddenly looking sad and disappointed, and finally one shrugged and said, "I guess he wins the dog." It's getting almost that bad in our society. The truth is no longer held as something that's really important. To some, it's just optional at best. Our political leaders lie and call it spin, and held up as an art form. We lie all the time and try to convince ourselves that it's necessary to do so just to get by. The New York Times said in an article that 91% of Americans confess that they regularly don't tell the truth. A full 20% admitted that they can't get through a day without telling conscious, premeditated white lies. So our culture has bought into this myth of a little white lie. However, a look at what the Bible says about honesty shows us that this concept of the white lie is a myth, that there is really no such thing as a little white lie, a harmless untruth, not when it is an actual effort to deceive. And so when we're talking about lying, it may amaze you, but I found that maybe we really need to state clearly what a lie is and what a lie isn't. The answer seems easy enough. Lying is telling a lie, a fib, an untruth, saying something that is not factual. However, that definition is incomplete, because every untruth is not necessarily a lie, and every lie is not necessarily something that is uttered with one's lips. The essence of a lie is that intent to deceive. If we say or do something that is intended to deceive another person, then we have committed that sin of lying. Now, this rules out when we unintentionally tell someone something that's not true, when we give misinformation or we misspeak or we give outdated information, and we do this all the time. And we tell someone something that is true to the best of our knowledge, but we find out later that it wasn't true at all. So what do we say? Oh, I'm sorry, I lied to you. No, we don't say that. We were mistaken, but there was no intent to deceive. That's not really a lie. The essence of the lie is that intent, the intent to deceive. When we define a lie that way, then we can see how even silence, sometimes not saying anything, can actually be a lie. Say you're talking to a friend and this friend tells you something that they heard about somebody else. We're talking about gossip now, another sin, but let's forget that for a minute. But let's say that what they heard is not flattering. Maybe it's a disparaging remark. And you know that it's untrue, yet you don't correct your friend's misconception. Maybe you don't even mind at all that he believes this rumor. You haven't said anything, but yet you have contributed to a lie. Now we might defend ourselves. I didn't say a word. I just kept my mouth shut and pretend that we didn't do anything wrong. However, if we set out to deceive someone, we have lied, even though we didn't actually say anything. So you don't even have to talk to lie. An accurate understanding of lying also means that we can tell a partial truth and yet still lie. A captain on a ship once had disciplined a certain sailor for an infraction of the regulations, and the sailor then held a deep grudge against the captain. Well, one day the captain was sick, and the sailor with a grudge against him was in command on the watch. And on this particular ship, it was the duty of the person in command to record the daily entry into the ship's log. And so that day, the sailor with the grudge against the captain entered into the log, "The captain was sober today." That was the truth. He was sober every day. He never drank. However, noting that he was sober that day was a selective truth. And the sailor said it because he wanted to hurt the captain's reputation. And so the truth was even stated in such a way that it was a lie. Now, when you're a child, you try to get away with that kind of thing. Anyone who has kids know that kids kind of work around the truth by, not saying things that are untrue, but just not owning up to the lie. We delight in saying that we didn't lie when we did. We've all done that. It's only natural. But unfortunately, this type of childish behavior often carries over into adulthood. We need to remember that when there is that intent to deceive, then it's a lie, plain and simple. So now when we start getting specific in our definition of what a lie is, the natural question may go like this. So what's really the big deal? Why can't we just lie now and then? What's the harm? It might prevent embarrassment in some situations, or it might avoid hurt feelings. Why can't we tell that occasional white lie, or shade the truth a little bit, or maybe exaggerate a little bit? Where's the harm? What's the danger? Good, legitimate questions. So let me give you 3 reasons why lying is harmful, why it's dangerous. First of all, lying is wrong and dangerous because it pushes us away from God. Everyone's heard the saying, God is love. That's true, it's right out of the Bible. But some make the mistake of thinking that God is only love. That statement is inaccurate because love is just one of God's many character traits. Just as accurately as one can say God is love, one can also say God is truth. In John 17:3, he's described as the one true God and Jesus who he has sent. In John 14:6, Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. He is truth. In John 16:13, the Holy Spirit is called the Spirit of truth, the one who leads us into all truth. And so God is truth. Truth is what God is. And so just as God defines what it means to be good and holy and pure, he also defines what it means to be true. Now Satan, on the other hand, is described as a liar in chapter 8:44 of John. It says, "You belong to your father the devil, and you want to carry out your father's desire. He was a murderer from the beginning, not holding to the truth, for there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks his native language, for he is a liar and the father of lies." So, when we lie, when we intend to deceive, we are not acting like God, but instead like Satan, his moral opposite. So even though it may not feel like it to us, every time we do or say something with that intent to deceive, we're pushing God away. We are moving further away from God and acting less like him. In some ways, it's like a person who has allergies. Never really understood this before, but I understand that allergies are when the immune system is overly sensitive. The immune system attacks pollen or ragweed or whatever the allergy is as if it were an invading virus or bacteria. And that's why people get the runny nose or the itchy eyes and the sneezing and so forth. The body cannot stand the presence of the substance. It's not simply a matter of the person disliking it, but his physiology rejecting it violently. The person cannot do anything to change that in and of himself. Now, medications can counteract the reaction, but by nature, there's just this violent rejection. Now, I know that analogy is not perfect, but it's in the same way kind of with God and lying, or with God and any sin. God doesn't just choose to dislike sin. By his very nature, he cannot stand the presence of it. Righteousness does not simply just describe God. He is righteousness by his very nature. And so when we callously, thoughtlessly lie in the course of everyday life, we are separating ourselves from God and who he is. And so that's the first danger in lying, is that it just simply pushes us away from God by our choice to do that. A second reason that lying is wrong is that it separates us from each other. Not only does it push us away from God, but it harms our relationship with other people as well. A wife once asked her husband, "Why don't you play golf with George anymore?" And her husband replied, "Would you play golf with a man who moved the golf ball with his foot when you weren't watching?" And his wife said, "Well, no, I wouldn't." And her husband said, "Well, neither will George." When we lie, it undermines our personal relationships, our marital relationships, our social relationships, whether it's a spouse or a best friend. If we cannot trust them to tell us the truth about important matters, or we can't trust them with a confidence, or to give us their honest and possibly difficult advice when we ask for it, then that relationship is going to be harmed, sometimes irreparably. Some of you might remember Dr. Laura Schlesinger, who was a radio commentator, but she wrote a book on the Ten Commandments, and she tells of a time when she caught her 6-year-old son in a lie. She'd given him the standard lecture many times before, so this time she tried something different. She told him that he would not know whether she was lying or telling the truth for 1 week. And her boy wasn't very bothered by this prospect initially, but the next day, while driving him to school, she told him that she would take him for a treat after school that day. So after school, while they were driving home, her son reminded her of a promise of going for a treat. And she turned to him and said simply, "I lied." Well, you can imagine the boy's reaction. He cried and he yelled and he told her that this was not nice and not fair. And after 2 days of this kind of sporadic lying, her son got the message. Now, please hear this. I am not recommending that you do this with your children. Not a good idea. But my point is that her point was made. When the truth is not a given factor in a relationship, then disappointment and heartache and insecurity are the inevitable results. Lying is wrong and dangerous because it causes serious problems in our relationships. But the third reason that lying is wrong is that it's very self-destructive. When we tell a lie, it very often leads to more lies and possibly to a whole lifetime of trouble, remembering what lie we told to whom and when. A woman named Jan was visiting her mother. The two women went for a walk and bumped into the mother's pastor. "Is this your daughter?" he asked. "Oh my, I remember when she was this high." And without pausing, Jan's mother said, "Well, she's 24 now." Jan, who was really 35, nearly fainted on the spot. And after they said goodbye to the pastor, Jan asked her mother why she told such a whopper. "Well," she replied, "I've been lying about my own age for so long, it suddenly dawned on me that I have to start lying about your age too." All right, funny example, but in reality, when we lie, whether it's to our parents or to spouses or to our children or our co-workers, it gets to be too much to keep our lies straight, to be constantly propping them up with more lies. Lying doesn't just alienate us from God and come between us and others, it also makes way too much work for the person who's doing the lying. Ultimately, it's very self-destructive. And we can all think of some more serious and personal examples of trying to avoid being caught in a lie. It's just so much less complicated to tell the truth and to deal with the ramifications rather than to lie and to try to keep up with all that we've said. Now, when my kids were growing up, we had a lot of VeggieTales videos. Do you still use those with your kids' parents? They're great. But there was one in particular called The Fib from Outer Space. The story was a cute little alien approaches this little boy. Actually, it was a little asparagus, but you kind of forget that along the way. And convinces the child that telling a little white lie won't hurt anything and will keep him out of trouble. And so after having to tell more lies to cover himself, the child discovers that this cute little alien grows up with each lie until it's a huge monster that's threatening to take over the whole city. And then finally the truth is told, and the only thing that can subdue this monster is the fact that the truth was told. A great children's story, but it doesn't just happen to kids. Now, all of that is the core of what I believe the Bible teaches regarding truthfulness and honesty and lying and integrity. However, there are still a couple of other things that we must touch on if we're going to get the whole story of the Bible's teaching on this subject. And the question often comes up, are there any exceptions to this rule? Is dishonesty ever justified? There are even some stories in the Bible when deception is used and God seems to approve of or not condemn it anyway. So is deception ever justified? And if so, when? One of my all-time favorite movies is The Hiding Place, about the Ten Boom family living in the Netherlands during World War II. And during the war, Holland was occupied by the Nazis, and they followed their pattern of occupying countries by first intimidating and then restricting and then finally seizing property and arresting all the Jewish people, sending them to concentration camps and executing the vast majority of them. Well, in the movie, Father Ten Boom, a devout Christian, first wore the yellow star himself, the star that Jews were forced to wear, even though his family wasn't Jewish. Then they hid a Jewish baby until it could be smuggled out of the country. And finally, they began to actually house Jews as a stop on the Underground Railroad out of Holland. And all these activities were what the occupying Nazis had declared to be illegal. Their pastor came by one day and urged them to stop doing these things, saying Christians must obey the law. And that's true. It's very clearly taught in scriptures. However, Father Ten Boom responded with something else that the Bible teaches, that Christians are supposed to obey God first, above any human law that contradicts his laws. Sometimes Christians are called to disobey a law when it conflicts with God's direct commands. And so they purposefully deceived the Nazis, and yet they did so with a clear conscience. However, as we've seen, deception is a sin. So how do we resolve this dilemma? Is it ever okay to tell a lie? Well, I believe that there is such a thing as the lesser of two evils. We live in a world where it is very possible to be faced with two choices, both of which are contrary to God's directives on how to live our lives. The presence of evil in this world and the resulting condition of mankind has created this scenario. And so there are times that we must ask ourselves, which is worse? And then we must make decisions based on what would cause the least harm or do the most possible good. And so, is the lesser of two evils still evil? The answer to that is yes, it is. See, that's why Jesus had to die on the cross. That's why he took the punishment of our sin, so that the sin of the world can be punished and the condition of mankind can be redeemed. We need forgiveness for those lesser of two evils just as much as we do the greater. Mankind is simply lost without Christ. And even though we must try to do our best to obey the commandments of God, the whole point of God giving them to us, as we've said right from the start of our study on the Ten Commandments, is for us to realize that we cannot keep them totally. And we must rely on the perfect righteousness of Jesus Christ, or else we fall short and we are separated from God forever. So yes, you could be forced into a situation where you feel that you must lie or be deceptive. But you know what? Something as drastic as the Nazis knocking on your door and asking you to give up your family is just not all that likely to crop up in your everyday life. And that is really more of a subject for debate than it is for our everyday life. For most of us, most every day, the matter of telling the truth is very clear-cut. Telling the truth may be difficult, but in just about any situation, it is the best and the right thing to do, even though it is seldom the easiest thing to do. So that leads us to another question about truth and deception that we might face more often. Does all the truth that we know always need to be spoken? People often hurt others with their insensitive and callous remarks, and when they're called on it, they say, well, I didn't lie, I was just telling the truth. There was nothing untrue in what I said, and sometimes the truth hurts, and I can't help that. And people love to confuse honesty with frankness. Just because something is true doesn't always mean that it needs to be said. Someone put it this way: honesty means that everything you say must be true, not that everything that is true must be said. The person who is cruel and insensitive to another and claims that they were just being honest is not obeying what Paul said in Ephesians when he said that we are to speak the truth, but to speak it in love. So I know tactfulness is not something that everybody has, but I believe that it can be learned. If you think before you speak, you can still be honest, but not hurtful. Sometimes it's hard, and yes, sometimes speaking the truth is going to hurt someone and there's nothing else to do but just to speak that truth. Sometimes secrets need to be kept because someone asked you to keep something confidential. That means that you can't say what the truth is sometimes. The whole truth cannot be shared. Sometimes the truth hurts unnecessarily, and so it ought to remain confined in your own mind, or at least tempered with a whole lot of love when it is shared. And sometimes the truth is simply not worth speaking at all. Now, don't misunderstand me. We are not to lie for the sake of convenience, but that doesn't mean that every true fact that enters our minds needs to be broadcast to everyone we know. Knowing which is something that comes from maturity, which is something that we ought to be striving for. Our goal in life ought to be to embrace the truth. This includes not only being people of integrity and honesty, but also embracing God, who embodies truth. The closer we are to Him, the more we know Him, the more truthful we are going to be in the rest of our lives. Our culture tells us that truth is subjective, that it's relative. It all depends upon the circumstances of the time and upon the views and the beliefs of the individuals involved. People will say, well, what's true for you might not be true for me. Well, yes, I know some things are relative, but truth is not one of them. If we are truly God's people, we won't listen to that deceptive mindset of our culture that says that little white lies are harmless. They are just mechanisms that help us cope with the complexities of life. Instead, we're going to listen to God, who cherishes the truth. If you know Jesus, as Crystal read for us, you'll know truth, and that truth will set you free from the deceptive mindset of a sinful world.